The old village huddled under a sky thick with stars. They glittered coldly like eyes watching from the abyss. A silence, deep and unsettling, had settled upon the village. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, pregnant with unseen things. The air, crisp and cold, carried the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The villagers, their faces etched with generations of tales whispered around flickering candlelight, knew this silence well. It was a silence that spoke of ancient terrors, of things best left undisturbed. For in the heart of this stillness, when the moon hung low and heavy in the sky, the phantom carriages rode. It began, as these things often do, on a night choked by an unnatural fog. The fog, thick and white, rolled in like a wave, swallowing the village whole. It clung to everything it touched, a cold, damp shroud that muffled sound and stole away the familiar shapes of the world. Visibility was reduced to mere feet. The air hung heavy, thick with moisture and the promise of something unseen. It was then, through the swirling mists, that the first carriage emerged. It materialized as if from the fog itself, a hulking silhouette drawn by horses blacker than the night. Their hooves beat a silent rhythm against the cobblestones, their breath pluming white in the chill air. They were spectral steeds, their eyes burning like hot coals in the fog. On this night, young Thomas Ashton found himself walking home alone. He had lingered too long at the tavern, warmed by good company and strong ale. Now he regretted his delay. The fog pressed in around him, cold and damp against his skin. He pulled his cloak tighter, his breath misting in the air as he hurried along the deserted lane. The silence, broken only by the sound of his own footsteps, pressed upon him, amplifying every creak and groan of the night. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. His mind conjured images from the old tales, tales of spectral carriages and the souls they carried, tales he had dismissed as mere stories, now whispered to him on the wind. Fear, sharp and cold, gripped him. It whispered that he was not alone. The following mornings dawned bright and clear. The fog vanished as if it had never been. Yet the memory of that night, of the ghostly carriage and its silent passage, lingered like a bad dream. It was a shared memory, etched into the fabric of the village itself. The villagers, their faces pale and drawn, spoke in hushed tones of the carriage and its unearthly steeds. They avoided the lane where Thomas had seen it, their fear a palpable thing. Life in the village continued, but it was a life now lived under a shadow. The routines of daily life, once comforting in their familiarity, now seemed fragile, easily shattered by the specter of the unknown. And as the days grew shorter and the nights longer, the villagers braced themselves for the inevitable return of the phantom carriages. Section 5, The Chill of Fear. They returned with the next full moon. It was a night much like the first thick fog, an oppressive silence and an air thick with anticipation. But this time there was more than one carriage. 2, then 3 materialized out of the swirling mists, their forms shifting and reforming in the gloom. They moved with an eerie grace, their wheels gliding over the cobblestones as if pulled by unseen hands. Within their shadowy depths, indistinct figures could be glimpsed, their forms shifting like smoke in the pale moonlight. They were there and not there, phantoms given form by the fog and the moonlight. The villagers watched from behind shuttered windows, their faces pale with terror. They knew better than to venture out on such a night, to risk encountering the carriages and their otherworldly occupants. For legend had it that those who looked upon the carriages too closely, who dared to meet the gaze of their spectral drivers, were doomed to join their procession for eternity. Section 6. Whispers of the Past. Thomas, haunted by his own encounter, found himself drawn to the windows each night. He watched as the carriages rolled through the village, their spectral forms a chilling reminder of the unseen world that existed just beyond the veil of reality. He began to research local history, poring over old tomes and crumbling scrolls, searching for any mention of the Carriages and their origins. He discovered tales whispered through generations, fragmented stories of a tragic accident that had taken place on the very road where he had encountered the first carriage. It was said that a wedding party, their carriage overturned in the fog, had met their end there, their souls forever bound to the site of their demise. These tales spoke of a curse, of a malevolent entity that had trapped the souls of the deceased, condemning them to roam the night in their spectral carriages. They were doomed to relive their final moments, forever searching for a way to break free from their spectral prison. Section 7. The Secrets of the Carriage. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a growing sense of dread, Thomas decided to seek out the truth behind the legend. He felt a strange pull towards the Carriages, a compulsion he couldn't explain. It was as if they were calling to him, beckoning him closer. On the next fog-choked night, armed with nothing but a lantern and his newfound knowledge, he ventured out into the night. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the promise of rain. He stood in the center of the lane, his heart pounding in his chest, waiting for the ghostly procession to begin. He could feel a presence drawing near, a coldness that seeped into his bones despite the layers of clothing he wore. The fog around him swirled and coalesced, taking on a life of its own. He closed his eyes, steeling himself for what was to come. Section 8. Unveiling the Truth. When he opened his eyes, a single carriage stood before him. It was closer now, its form solidifying out of the drifting fog. The horses, their coats as black as night, snorted and pawed the ground, their breath misting in the air. The driver, a skeletal figure shrouded in a black cloak, sat rigidly upon the box, his face obscured by the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine as he met the driver's gaze. His blood ran cold. He recognized the skeletal face, the hollow eyes staring back at him. It was the face of his great-grandfather, a man he had only seen in faded portraits, a man rumored to have disappeared without a trace. His great-grandfather's skeletal hand emerged from beneath the cloak, pointing a bony finger directly at Thomas. A rattling sound escaped the driver's concealed lips. It was a name barely audible above the rustling leaves and the creaking of the carriage, yet Thomas heard it with terrifying clarity. Section 9. Trapped in Eternity. It was his name, his own name, uttered with a chilling familiarity, echoing through the generations. The ghostly horses snorted, their breath hot against his face. For the first time, Thomas noticed the carriage door was slightly ajar, and from within he heard whispers. They were faint, like the rustling of dead leaves, yet he understood their desperate pleas. They were begging him to help them, to free them from their eternal ride. He reached out a hand toward the carriage door, his heart thundering in his chest. He had to help them, even if it meant facing the unknown. He could feel a pull, a force drawing him towards the carriage, urging him to step inside. His hand trembled as he grasped the cold metal handle. It was as if the carriage itself was alive, its ghostly energy beckoning him closer. Section 10. An Endless Ride. The spectral horses snorted again, their breath swirling around him like phantom smoke. The carriage door swung open, revealing the carriage's dimly lit interior. Inside, spectral figures, their forms shimmering like heat haze, turned toward him with a mixture of hope and despair in their eyes. They reached for him, their ethereal fingers brushing against his skin, sending shivers down his spine. He took a step closer, his foot crossing the threshold into the carriage's chilling embrace. The door slammed shut behind him with a resounding thud, and the carriage lurched forward, its wheels crunching over the cobblestones. Thomas was trapped, swept away into the swirling mists, destined to join the endless procession of the phantom carriages. His screams were swallowed by the fog, lost in the chilling silence of the night.